Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Influence webinar. We are so happy to have you guys with us tonight. Always excited. We do a lot of planning for this thing, and when it happens, well, we just can't contain ourselves sometimes. So tonight we got a great night planned for you tonight. It's going to be on the subject of social media. I'm sure none of you have ever heard of that before. But yes, we are all on social media. We're all on our phones. We're all trying to stay connected these days. And it's a subject I think that we haven't addressed in the past, but I think is so very relevant in our culture and world today. And certainly COVID has accelerated the need for us to be able to use it effectively and to be able to use it to tell our stories, to ask questions, and to share the love of God in our lives to others and in the work that we do. So tonight, I just want you to sit back, grab hopefully a cup of coffee. If you haven't done so, I hope you have one already in front of you or something to drink or a cup of tea. We're going to have a great time tonight. I usually focus on our historic women of influence at the end of the evenings. And for those of you who have never been on a webinar before, one of the things I do at each webinar is focus on a historic woman of influence, someone who we can read about, be mentored with, who can teach us how to be Christ in the world today. And so often we think, well, these women come from different centuries, from different times. But you know what? Human nature is always the same. We always have the same needs in our lives, and that's to be seen. It's a need to be loved, a need to know that we are worthwhile and who we are, a need to understand the longings of our hearts. These are all the same. They're universal. God's put all these things in our DNA when He created us because they're important. And because He knows that they will be used, and He wants us to use them to share who He is and His kingdom purposes. So tonight I'm going to talk about our historic women of influence first, right off the bat. I want you to take some notes. I've talked about this particular woman before in live events that we've had here in Los Angeles and various places around the country before, but I've never shared about her online right now in a webinar. And she's one of my favorite mentors in my life. You know, Craig Rochelle said that how you live reflects what you really believe. And I truly believe that about Hannah, because that's how Hannah conducted her life. Hannah More was born in the late 1700s, early 1800s was her lifespan. She was the daughter of a school teacher, one of 5 daughters. She understood from the very early of her part of her life the importance of words. That was taught to her by her father. And she lived outside of London, and she viewed London as being the place to be, the place she wanted to end up in her life. And so early on, she made efforts to try to find a way to get to London and rub elbows, so to speak, with the celebrities of the time, the wealthy, the privileged, that were the leaders and the influencers in London at the time, and for the world, for that matter. And she eventually made it there because she became a well-known playwright and a poet. Her plays were were produced and done in Covent Garden. And William Garrick, who was one of the renowned Shakespearean actors of the time, was one of her supporters, was a big fan of Hannah. Her plays sold out for years, not just months, but for year after year. Her poetry was read regularly. And because of that, it allowed her to be invited to some of these celebrity dinners that we would call them today, these places of influence. And she got to know those people, so many people of influence within London. But God called her back. It was an interesting time in her life. She was in her 20s, and she fell in love with a very wealthy man. And during this time, he asked her to be his wife, and they were in a period of engagement. Well, back in that time, when you were engaged, it was like you were married. And because the family felt that Hannah didn't come from a high enough position, a wealthy enough family. They convinced her fiance to disengage himself. And most of us today would find this devastating, but Hannah looked at it differently. Sure, it hurt for a while, but Hannah was able then to use the finances, because once you were engaged to a man, he was actually obligated to you the rest of his life. And so he was able to finance Hannah's existence, basically. And it gave her the ability to do what God had called her to do, gave her financial stability and a very interesting position. Hannah went on to be a part of the Clapton circle. God got a hold of her life, and she began to see the reality that being a star, being an influencer was a bigger calling for her, that God had placed her with gifts and talents that she could use. And so she became an influencer. She went back to London and became an influencer as part of what is called the Clapton Circle. The Clapton Circle is an interesting circle. It included John Newton, who wrote, of course, Amazing Grace. It included William Wilberforce, the parliamentarian, who is attributed to being the one that pushed through the act to end slavery in London and the UK, and eventually here in the United States. And so her position was key. She was the only woman on this. The Clapton Circle was a very interesting group of men, predominantly. She was the only woman. And their focus was the reformation of society. We would have called them the true social workers of our culture and our world today, the social activists of our culture today. 17 organizations that they established. This was back again in the late 1700s, early 1800s. 17 of those organizations are still in existence today. They were early abolitionists. They abdicated. They wanted to reform social issues like child abuse, child labor laws, cruelty to animals. The SPCA is one of these organizations that is still in existence today. Hannah had a great career and a great life. She never married, but she understood the power of words. And that's why I want to focus on her tonight. As we focus on social media, as we focus on the power of word, the power of pictures, Hannah understood how to use that. She would go to these parties, these celebrity dinner parties in London with these well-established, privileged majority. And she would hide diagrams of how slaves were loaded into the bottom of slave ships. And she would pull these diagrams out and show them to the women and say, did you know that this is what is happening? Do you know that this is how slaves come to us? And because of some of the things that she did like this, she got the women to be aware of what was happening, and they then influenced their husbands who were in positions of leadership and in positions to make things happen. They, of course, women back then didn't have the vote, but the men did, and they had much influence in the men in their lives. As women today, she is a perfect example of how to use words, how to use pictures. She would show the cruelty to animals and things like that from time to time to these women's groups, to teas and gatherings that she would attend for women. And she would use those things to change the world and change the culture. That's the opportunity we have with social media today. That's the opportunity we have if we're able to use it effectively and we're able to use it well. As you know, social media has polarized us, has changed the way that we live our lives. And so tonight, we want to try to change that in some way. We want to be able to harness its important aspects and be able to use it to change people's lives. So tonight, I'm going to bring in two wonderful women that have joined us tonight. I think you're just going to love them to death. The first person I want to introduce to you tonight is Laura Woodworth. Laura is part of our team here at Cooke Media Group. She is a writer, producer. She has she's my right hand to what we do here at Cook Media Group and at the Influence Lab. She's written a wonderful devotion that's on the YouVersion app that you can download. She has an article for you to read on iDisciple and the work that she's doing there on some of these on that site. So you can get a hold of her at laurawoodworth.com. And then our second person tonight that we're going to introduce is Megan Spear. Megan, wow, she's just a jewel. I've known Megan for quite some time. She's the Vice President of Marketing for Support Network, and she brings 15 years of social media experience and digital marketing experience to the platforms tonight. She's passionate also about urban ministry, just like Hannah Moore was. She's passionate about using media and using social media to change the world. She resides in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She's been a part of an organization and a ministry when I first met her called Courage for Life, and many of you have heard me talk about that organization in the past. She's written a brand new book called Letting Go of Should. Letting Go of Should. You can learn so much about her at meganspear.com. Megan, I'm going to start with you tonight. You grew up and currently live in Pittsburgh, and I love that you've written a book, that you've gone ahead and done that at such an early age. I wish I'd started writing a little bit earlier on in life myself. But I also love that you're a book nerd, that you love to read. I think that's so important for us today, and that you are compelled then to write. So so tonight, I just want to have you tell us a little bit about yourself, your life in Pittsburgh, how you got into social media, and just share with us a little bit of who you are personally.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathleen. It's certainly my pleasure. Letting go of should, let me back up. I am a total book nerd, and friends of mine have joked that I read everything, so I had no choice but to write another one because I had read them all already. Giant book nerd, love to read. And I have always liked to write. And so last year, June-ish, I found myself in a really interesting place in my career and in life in general. And I was journaling to process that. I have always been a big journaler. And so as I started to kind of journal through that process, I kept being reminded of all of these seasons where when I chose what someone else's expectations were and tried to live up to that, I was frustrated. I struggled with mental health issues. It was just really a very down season for me. But the times in life where I have been most fulfilled and most excited and most joyful are when I'm living into who God has gifted me to be instead. And so the more that I was processing what was currently happening in the season, the more I saw that as a pattern through it all. And so letting go of should is that story. It's my story of kind of moving beyond those expectations. Which has been super fun.
Wow. Thanks, Megan. And I would really encourage those who are watching tonight to grab that book. It's a very fun little fast read. I stayed up one night when I was not able to sleep and read it all in one sitting and just enjoyed her vulnerability in it, Megan, more than ever. Your ability to share not just successes, but a lot of failures. And I believe that we don't share our failures enough often with one another. And it's within these failures, I think, that we can learn so much from each other. So thanks so much for sharing that book. Laura, you are a jewel, like I said, in my life. And you just are a gifted writer. You are an editor. You have an incredible family. You're a new grandma just recently in the last couple of weeks. So fun. So how did you start? I want to have you share a little bit about your personal background, but also share with us a little bit about why words matter to you. Why are you a modern day Hannah Moore?
I always joke when I was growing up, very much wanted to be a dancer. And in fact, I trained professionally to go to New York, never went there. But my sister was always the writer. But it was really once I embraced a relationship with Jesus Christ that I began to grab hold of the power of words. And I have a missions background. My husband and I served on the mission field, and we've also taught in a Bible college. One of the courses we taught was cross-cultural missions. And in that course, I was inspiring the students to use whatever means possible to reach people. And that included using digital media, that you could be sitting in the middle of the United States and you could reach somebody in a persecuted country like Pakistan or even China, because one way or another, people will get on the internet. And that really spurred in me the desire and the, I guess really the compelling drive to write, and not only to write, but to write strategically. I managed the writing for a major ministry for several years, writing all the articles, the testimonies of people's lives changed, and blogs and things, but reaching people on the internet. And I think that's my goal, to write strategically. And I will mention, here's a good example. You mentioned my YouVersion devotionals. I have 10 YouVersion devotionals. And just through that, I have 100,000 people from around the world who've connected with those devotionals. And it's just a good, hopefully an encouragement to people for what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Fabulous. Yes. Well, I again would encourage viewers tonight to get on that YouVersion app and download some of those devotionals. I think that they will really encourage your heart and grow you in so many directions that I know will whisper to you about. So thanks, Laura, for being here again tonight with us and sharing your great gift of words with us. Megan, I'm going to pop back to you. We're going to start with some rapid fire questions real fast. And these are going to be kind of more about just the technology, some of the tools, the way to use them. And then we're going to get into some more deeper questions on the content. So Megan, just real fast, there's Instagram, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's TikTok, there's all these platforms. Do we need to be on all of them? And which one do we need to be on? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes. So I have 2 rules of thumb when it comes to social media, and it doesn't matter for me if you're a brand or a person, either one, right? You can be wherever you'd like, but you have to be excellent where you choose to be. And nobody can be excellent everywhere. It's just impossible, right? And so a lot of figuring out where to be on social media has to do with who you're trying to talk to. For me right now, my biggest pieces are on Instagram, because that's my demographic is women mid-20s to wherever, right? That's kind of who the book talks. And so that's really my piece from a personal me as Megan perspective. For me, Megan, as the professional with Marketing Support Network, LinkedIn and Twitter are much more effective there. At this point, the only reason I have Facebook is to stay connected to family, because some of my older relatives, that's where they live. So it just kind of depends on what your goal is. I can't think of a scenario where anyone needs to be across all platforms everywhere, but you have to be willing to excel and be excellent wherever you choose to be, and be willing to put the time into it.
Great answer. Great answer. Yes. For me, I'm not on Pinterest. I have an account there just because somebody told me a long time ago I needed to be on Pinterest, but that's not who I am. I'm not a crafty person right now. I used to be, and I love crafts and I love the art, but I don't have the time to spend on Pinterest right now. So, but Instagram and there's been a great, there's been a lot of younger people are on Instagram, where a whole general audience, global audience for me is on Facebook. So I find that my global audience really gets to me on Facebook. So you're right. And it's about excellence, isn't it? It's about really doing excellent work on those platforms once you're on them.
Now, I would put
Yeah,
one
go ahead.
caveat on there too, is that you never kind of know where these platforms are going to go. And so the one thing I do tell everyone is that it's always good to get on and claim your name, right? Claim your
Yeah,
handle.
right.
I want to be Megan_Spear everywhere that I am. And so I like to be one of the first people on there, because from a brand standpoint, or if you're a company, you want to go and claim your name. That doesn't mean that you have to be on there all the time. But it is, that's the one caveat I would give, is that it's good to get on and claim your space. I also have a Pinterest. I have no reason to do it. I don't cook, I don't craft, and I don't own a house. I have no interest. But I'm on there just to claim my Megan Spear spot.
And that's a really good point. And that's exactly why I'm on there too. I think that consistency in your handles is really important. So good extra note there. Laura, how often should we be posting? I know, is there a sweet spot in how many times a day we should be posting on these platforms?
That's a good question. I'm going to key off of what Megan said about excellence, doing whatever you do with excellence. Consistency is very, very important, even if it's just one time a day on whatever platform you choose. And then as far as the different platforms, you could get away with 15 tweets a day on Twitter, especially if you space them even during the night. That can work. But when we're talking Facebook, usually one, maybe 2 posts a day is good. And the same way with Instagram, 1 to 2 posts. And then be very careful, like sometimes we use those Hootsuite or Buffer or whatever, and it's so easy to duplicate posts. But one little word of caution, for example, on Instagram, very often people will go back and look at your Instagram page, and you don't want the same image showing up all over your Instagram page. So just keep that in mind when you do post. Make sure it's unique and original, and quality always over quantity. But if you can at least get 1 post out there a day on whatever platform you choose, you're doing well.
Great. And we're going to talk about quality here in a minute. So, Megan, talk to us about hashtags. How do we use those effectively? And is there a number? I've been told, like on Instagram, that you should have at least 11 hashtags. Give us the facts.
Okay, so here's my opinion and what I see industry wise. Instagram hashtags are great, but I would suggest putting them, so here's your caption, and you want to hit enter a couple times and put all your hashtags down at the bottom, or put them in your first comment. What has started to look at this point a little overdone is when you have a sentence and 7 of the words are hashtagged, right?
That's me. I've done that.
I'm so sorry, Kathleen. That is never the answer. Right? And part of that, right? The whole, let's level set, right? Because the whole point of a hashtag is to insert yourself in a discussion, right? And insert yourself in something that is happening. And so so for example, I had to correct one of our staff the other day. They were putting some hashtags together, putting some tweets together for a couple of the ministries that we work on. And one of the tweets that they were putting out, they had hashtagged John and then space and done 316, because you can't do the punctuation in there. So I said, okay, so what you've done is hashtag John. John who? Right? It's not necessarily like our default is to say the book of John, but it could be some random John. You have no idea what we're talking about at this point. So it's really good to, I would say, go back to your basic grammar lessons, right? What's the subject of the sentence?
Yeah.
Put a hashtag in front of the actual subject or the conversation that you're trying to join. But overall, hashtagging every other word is going to make you look almost like you're trying too hard at this point. But I do agree, Kathleen, on Instagram, they're super critical. And so my suggestion to everybody is maybe put 1 up in the caption, and then, like I said, finish your caption, hit return a couple times, and put the all of the hashtags down at the bottom, or just put them in your first comment. And a lot of those scheduling platforms that Laura mentioned will actually let you schedule first comment as well, so that you can do that effectively.
Great, great. And so you've just shamed me here on this webinar. That's exactly what I've been doing. But you know what? We're all learning, including me. I have lots to learn from all of you guys. Laura, you know, let's talk about Instagram too for a second. When you want to post you have a bio in your Instagram, and when you want to post a link, there's a new app that you have been using and has graciously helped us in getting on our Instagram bio. Can you talk about that? It's INK.
It's actually it's link bio.
Link bio.
And so and we'll have Victoria put the link in the chat, but you know, you can only have one URL in your Instagram. And so many times we'll put in our website, and that works, but it's so very limited. What if you're talking about a specific article on your website, or an event that you're a part of? And so, oh, this is good. Yes, this is link bio. Now, there's also another one called Linktree, which is very good, but I like link bio. In fact, if you go to the Influence Lab or over to Kathleen's Instagram page or account and just click on her link in bio, you'll see the wonderful features. You can add images, you can add animation. It's very beautiful. And I took the time, a quick story, I took the time to set mine up really quickly one day. And then I had an email conversation with someone later, and they were asking about some things, and I was able to tell them, just click on my bio on my Instagram. It's all there. And it's a beautiful feed, and people can link right to anything that you want to mention. So these are not expensive apps. So if you can, I would go ahead and spend the extra little bit to get either Linktree or that link.bio with the images available. It's really great.
Well, I'm going to move a little bit more into the content area now and talk about how we post and the importance of those posts and the way that we can grab people's attention, speak the language of the culture today. Megan, I'm going to start with you again with content. Tonight's webinar really focuses on our personal content on the web. Yet many of us are involved in businesses and organizations, churches perhaps. But what's the difference in how we should post on our personal page and how we post in a business with businesses or organizations? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So first of all, I think there's a difference too between Megan. I'll use myself as the example. At this point, I am Megan the person. I am Megan the Vice President of Marketing Support Network, and I am Megan the author. And so even in those, there's different distinctions, right, of the types of content that each person would talk about, let alone the company blog or some of our clients' social medias. So a lot of that is going to have to, from a business perspective, is going to be based on your goals. What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to drive traffic to your website? Are you trying to get people to attend an event? And so I like to have organizations have their social media be very goal focused. Personally, I have two, right? Because I am Megan the person and I'm Megan the author. And so I would love for people to go buy books. But I also want to be Megan the person. And so I'm going to jump back, Kathleen, to something that you had mentioned about the book, is that it is very vulnerable and it talks about both successes and failures. For me, I think one of the things that kind of puts me off of social media for people that I'm following is when it is only the successes and the wins, right? So it's so easy to make social media be this highlight reel of what's going on and not talk about the other side. And so that for me has always kind of been the balancing act of, yes, there are some really great things happening and I want to talk about those, but sometimes I have a bad day and so I do try, especially from a personal brand perspective, I think we're a lot more trustworthy and a lot more relatable. And especially as people of faith, when we can say, look, this is a rough season, but here's what God is doing. I think those are even more powerful than all sunshine and rainbows in a social setting for sure.
Great, great. Yes, great answer. Laura, I'm going to pop over to you now. What's your opinion on posting scriptures constantly, quotes from people? What about jokes? Talk to us about what's appropriate, what isn't appropriate. How do you feel about us just posting scriptures all the time?
I think one of the things that you're after is your voice, whether it is a business or it is a personal page. What is your voice? If you're always cutting up and you're a jokester and that is your voice, then go ahead and put your jokes out there. But if you are really trying to share inspiration, then that's where an inspirational quote or a scripture could very much come into play. So you do want to mix up your content. I think people get turned off when they're always seeing scriptures and that's all you're putting out there, because then you've lost that authenticity and that vulnerability that Megan just mentioned of, being personable, being social on social media. And so I think you can put the scriptures out there. I'm just going to say this, if you're going to build a scripture meme, kindly make the words large enough that I can read it as I'm scrolling through, because that's what people are doing. And, you may have a favorite verse or something that's really burning that you really want to share, but it's a long scripture. Break it into a smaller piece and put that tidbit in a meme and make sure it's very legible, because you've always got to remember people are scrolling and they're scrolling quickly. They'll just scroll right past something if it's not legible. And if your goal is to inspire and to encourage, you've just missed that mark by not thinking strategically and not thinking about the person you're trying to reach.
Yes. I often say too, Laura, that yeah, go
Sorry.
ahead. Megan, pop in there.
Yeah, I want to hop in on Laura's point. Actually, piggybacking to your first question to me, Kathleen, was the business versus the personal. My first official job in social media was for a Christian radio station here in Pittsburgh. And I was so excited about speaking for this as the station, right? And creating their social media. And I would find I would get very frustrated because I would find these really great articles on Christian worldview and things that I thought were so thought-provoking, and I would post them and they would get crickets. And then I would put scripture on a picture of a rainbow and the thing would go gangbusters. And I kind of got a little frustrated by what I felt was the shallowness of that engagement, until I had this aha moment where I thought, these are people who might not be willing on their own social media to say, this is here's my scripture of the day. But they were willing to share it when someone else said it. So when you ask the question between a brand and a personal, there is absolutely a space for nonprofits and ministries to be putting those out, right? To be putting out the inspirational quotes or the scriptures, because those are things that people are much more likely to share when they come from a larger organization. Versus me as Megan just consistently posting what scripture I read that day. So I think that's to Laura's point, she just gave us a perfect example of that balance.
That's great. That's a great follow-up.
I have to add this. And one thing I've noticed, you talk about the rainbow picture. It is so true. We may think it's a cheesy picture, but it's so true. It's those kind of pictures that really resonate with people, yes, because it takes them to another place with that scripture. So feel free to do the rainbows,
yes,
and the landscapes, and the thoughtful look into the ocean. Feel free. People like that.
So let's talk about those pictures for a minute. I am a real advocate for finding pictures that really capture people's attention rather than just a rainbow. I feel like that a great picture can make people who are scrolling at 90 miles an hour through their feed stop and take a look. So, how is there a place that you have found that you can get great pictures for free?
Yes. So there are, I mean, you can certainly do a search for royalty-free photos. The name has escaped me and I'll think of it as I'm talking. Our team uses a lot, oh, there we go, from Unsplash.
Yes.
Unsplash.com has a fantastic library of photos just like that are very eye-catching, but still leave you a lot of space to be able, if you want to put graphics over top of it or words over top of it, they're really easy to work with.
Yeah, that's the one I use too, and I found that they've their pictures. You can Google just about any subject and find something that will work, and you can use it on practically anything you want to use it for free, which is great. And so, yeah, it's a great Unsplash is a great place to get to land to get some great pictures. Let's move a little bit to talk about. I go back maybe a little bit to what we talked about a minute ago about authenticity and being able to stop talking about ourselves and putting some social media posts out that actually captures the ability to show that we care about those who are viewing our social media. I think that social media is all about me. We have a tendency, I mean, as actors out here, writers, producers, we're always posting stuff about projects, or I particularly see a lot of actors posting pictures of them in their latest outfit or their latest place that they're going. And we always post a lot of pictures of what we're eating all the time. Give us some great examples of being creative on how we can capture people's attention and get it off ourselves and how we can serve them through social media.
So I think ultimately, I think no matter what your profession is or what you're trying to accomplish with social, to try and be all things is never going to work regardless. And so what I kind of encourage everybody to think about is, what are the 5 things that you post about? So if you go to my Instagram page, you're going to see that I post a lot about Pittsburgh. I should probably work for the tourism board at this point. I post a lot of pictures of coffee, a lot of travel, a lot of urban ministry and the work that I do with students here on the north side. And then also just kind of work and leadership pieces. Like, here's my life as a professional. And so those are the things I post about. A lot of that then in the caption, like, here's the picture of where I'm traveling today, but then where I think that some of that authenticity and connection comes back is where you can ask, if you could jump on a plane right now and go anywhere. We've all been stuck home for a long time. If you could jump on a plane and go anywhere, where would it be? And engage your audience in a question around that, or wish them a good day in the caption of your morning coffee. So especially Laura talked earlier about the power of words. The picture is great, but it's that connection goes back and forth too. And I think you have a lot of power with your words in those captions.
Great. Laura, what about you? So 2 or 3 tips.
I would really think about your audience. And I do this quite a bit because I've managed a number of social media pages over the past number of years, whether it's a business or ministry. But for my own personal page, I'm always thinking about who is my audience. And you can go, if you have an official page, you can go in and you can actually check your demographics. Do you have more women than men? What are the ages of those people? And so I'm always thinking about what is going to resonate with these people. What is going to, if we're talking about inspiring and motivating people versus just posting those pictures of the lunch we just ate, what's going to resonate with them? What's going to encourage them, or what's going to connect them to something that I feel is really beneficial for their life? So I use that to guide the choices that I make for the posts that I put out there. And I think if you're always thinking beyond yourself and the benefit that you're giving to your audience, I think you'll hit a good space there. And we're always after engagement. We're always wanting to check our insights and see if we're striking a chord with our audience. And so if you check your insights, you can see what are the posts that people are liking and engaging with and sharing. then that can help guide you as you make decisions on future posts.
Great comment. Megan, I'm gonna kind of go in a different direction for a minute here. We've, for those of you who viewers have not seen The Social Dilemma, which is a movie that is currently on Netflix, that was done by some of the creators of the platforms that we use every day. One of the gentlemen that is a participant in that documentary actually created the like button on Facebook. So they know what's happening and how social media is being used. And that movie is a really interesting movie to view if people have not seen that, to see how social media has changed our lives, how it's influencing our young people, causing lots of depression, causing lots of dysfunction in families, and actually in our government today. For years, I thought that the big brother, the government, would be the ones who would be censoring our words, censoring who we are, censoring what we're saying. And that's, been a huge part of who we are as Americans. But now it's the social media providers, it's the platform providers. They are now become the big brother or the censors for social media and for broadcasting. Now that all of us are on it, all of us are using it, all of us want to have our stories and our platforms and things that we're working on, our organizations, be seen and heard. Give us a little insight on some of the things that you found on how, number one, social media is polarizing us, and number two, speak a little bit, Megan, on censorship and what happens when we're censored, some of the things we can and cannot do.
Absolutely. So I think, first of all, if you haven't seen The Social Dilemma, I can't recommend it enough. It's a really, really interesting documentary. My mom watched it and called me and said, "Is that what you do for a living? You shouldn't do that anymore." I was very upset about it. But I think one of my favorite quotes from there is that if you're not paying for a product, you are the product. Mm-hmm. Right. And so we at this point have become the product because they need us on those sites. And so I think on one hand, yeah, it can, to have companies and platforms like that be able to regulate and censor what you see, right, and who you hear it from. We certainly saw that in the last 10 years of elections and political cycles. I am a little encouraged. I think, Kathleen, our friend Nona Jones, mm-hmm. Is with Facebook, and so I think Facebook, maybe more than some of the others, does still have faith-based platforms in mind. They brought her on as the director of faith-based partnerships, so that she is figuring out how to help Facebook and Instagram use those platforms effectively for ministry, especially. So I'm encouraged by that. I don't see that sort of partnership or investment in faith communities from Twitter, from LinkedIn, from YouTube, from any of those the secondary platforms, or not secondary YouTube, but some of the others, right? Maybe not as many people on Twitter. So I am encouraged by the Facebook, Instagram side in that regard. But even then, we've seen some censorship and people getting their accounts shut down for things. So mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing to me, and I I get a lot of pushback when I say this. If you are loudly standing on your soapbox and screaming, you are going to attract attention, right? And social is the exact same way. If you are loudly standing on your soapbox and yelling political or hate or whatever it is that you're yelling, or you're yelling Bible verses in an angry fashion, because we've all seen people take scripture out of context to justify bad behavior, you are going to draw attention to yourself. But by living out your faith through photos and captions, through engaging in encouraging content, none of that at this point is going to cause you a problem. So if you want to try and avoid it, right, it's like anything else in life. I can go, if somebody goes running naked across the parking lot here at the office, well, we're going to have a problem with that. And that's going to draw attention, and we're going to have to shut that down. But if somebody is casually out on a lunchtime walk, that causes no problem.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think this idea of I always have to be the loudest in the room is what is going to start to gain attention and bad ramifications.
Laura, do you have some comments on this and some things that you've experienced?
And I guess I would just, what she said is just so good, Kathleen.
Yeah.
And I would say, you know, it's okay if you have an opinion to share and that is your voice on social media and people expect it. But everything you share has to be done in love. That's who we are. We are love. And so you've got to find a way to share your opinions, whatever you feel you need to put out there on social media. It's got to be backed by love and a spirit of humility. I think if we temper it with those two things, then we're able to maybe share strong opinions and be received in those situations. I will say, be forewarned and be prepared. If you're going to be sharing about some of these the injustices and just some of the things going on in our culture right now, if you're going to be vocal about that, backed by love and humility, you also need to be prepared with a social media strategy thought out of how are you going to respond to your critics. And just know that you're going to have the critics. You're going to have some people who are speaking up against what you're bringing forth. And then you've got to choose your battles and know what's worth paying attention to and what is better left ignored.
Yeah,
so that
great.
would just be my words.
Yes.
I wholeheartedly agree. My strategy for everybody has always been, you do not have to attend every fight to which you have been invited, right? And so I know it's really easy to jump on and want to, you know, speak your opinion and go. But you don't have to attend every battle. But I do, and to Laura's point, you know, the comment section, if you decide to speak up, the comment section on your post can get a little heated. And so you've got to really decide what the rules of engagement are on your page. Are you going to let friends of yours who have differing viewpoints battle it out? Are you going to shut that down? Having a strategy for all of those pieces before you step into the fray is going to be a good plan.
Yes. And I would add, watch your emojis. You know, sometimes we post all those fire flames and we post these mad faces and all of those kind of things. I think that adds to the volume of what you're saying. And it certainly doesn't come across as being kind and gentle. Yes, we want to fire people up and make people excited. I was on a recent group of speakers that used a lot of those flames and a lot of that rhetoric, that real harsh stuff. And they got shut down for Facebook ads. I think Facebook thought that they were a little bit of a threat, and they were the same Facebook ads they were going to post from the year previously. They were just changing the dates on them. So we're living in that world where we have some moderators now, some people who are paying attention and watching. And I think that's very, very important for us to remember that we post things that are uplifting, that are good, that are valuable, and try to keep the harsh comments down. So, hey, this has been a great conversation. We're going to continue this conversation here for a few minutes with our chat room. So if you've been joining us and you can't stay around for the next 15, 20 minutes, we're going to do in the chat room. We again want to thank you for being a part of the Influence webinar tonight. I hope that you've been able to learn some things and grow in your faith and grow in your skills in using social media and the platforms that we're all using today to grow and to help others to grow your platform platform and to grow your story. I'm going to thank our speakers now, but they're going to stay on again in the chat room with Victoria, and look for us with the Influence Lab journal every week. So I hope if you have not signed up for that journal that you will do so. Follow us on our social media, and know that we're praying for you. Those of you who are in leadership, in media and entertainment, we know you are the megaphones. We know that you are the voices out there that need to be heard and seen. So we're praying that the projects you're creating, the artistic endeavors that you're doing would resonate, would grow, and that God would give you those extra measures of creativity. You know, God introduced himself in the first part of the Bible. First sentence in the Bible is, in the beginning, God created. We are created, and we are created after his image. So thank you for being a part of the webinar. If you're not staying on with us, if you're staying on, stay on. We're going to bring Victoria in right now. Thanks, Victoria, for coming on. And Megan and Laura, thank you for staying on for a few minutes. I think this is one of the most important times and parts of our webinar, is that our audience can ask some vibrant questions, some important questions that they want to be to know. So Victoria, I'm going to send it right to you. Can you give us one of our first questions that's come through in the chat room?
Absolutely. One of the first questions that we actually had come through in the Q&A is, can you overdo emojis? Are there too many? It's pressing. Let us know, Megan.
Absolutely. Emojis are like anything else, right? Sparingly. They're absolutely fun. And there's a difference, can you overdo emojis in a text with your sister? No, go ahead. Have at it. But in an Instagram caption, in a Facebook caption, in a tweet, yes, one or two sprinkled in, totally fine. But like anything else, and I would say the other thing that would go along with that, and actually back to your point earlier, Kathleen, when we get all the flames and it's like, whoo, too much, would be the all caps can also totally be overdone, because that is a lot of shouting that nobody needs.
It is good to add one, maybe two, because they do add extra interest and they can increase your engagement rate. So just be careful.
Brenda asked, which medium is the best for women's ministry specifically? Is there one that you found resonates more with women than other platforms?
Good question.
That's a great question. I would vote for Facebook and Instagram as your top two, unless I've seen some people have some really good success on the women's ministry side in Pinterest, but that takes a whole very dedicated effort.
I would agree with that. And just a note on Pinterest, what I'm finding is younger women are spending a lot of time on there. So depending on what you have to offer, what your ministry is or business or whatever, if it's a good match for Pinterest, I would say go after it. I've got daughters who, every time I turn around, it's like they got this recipe from Pinterest or this idea. So it is something to consider if you're ready to put the time and effort into that platform.
Megan, what about TikTok these days? I know the young people are on TikTok like crazy right now. Give us a little few minutes on what's your view on TikTok.
So TikTok is super fun, and I say for a personal brand, it can be really, really great, especially if your audience is, I would say, maybe like 25 and younger at this point, if that's who you're trying to reach. It's really hard for a brand to do well. It just comes off looking like an imposter or like you're trying too hard, or so TikTok is one where if you're a brand and you're trying to make a presence, that's when you might want to look at using an influencer instead of like the official brand having a TikTok. But super fun. Again, I would encourage everybody to just get on and check it out, because some of those videos are really funny. Some are really creative. The artistic ability of some of these kids is incredible. But from a personal brand perspective, unless you are specifically targeting that audience, it's maybe just one to observe, because it does take a lot of work.
Yeah, I've noticed I've got my account on TikTok already. I've got my name, so I've been good, but I haven't played around with it too much. But I know it is for a very young audience. I know it's very comedical. A lot of comedy is on it. A lot of sensational type things are happening on it, and so it's an interesting platform to explore. But I agree, it's not one for business or some kind of real strategic business matters or anything. It's pretty much just this fun little thing, as far as I can see so far. So,
what do you think about post length? Whether that is a video or how much should be written in your description for each post?
Couple different, again, it's going to depend on the platform. Right? Twitter, you want to keep shorter is better, unless you're going to do multiple tweets and have a whole thread, and that takes a lot of commitment. But on Instagram and Facebook, we're actually seeing a trend towards longer posts. Obviously, if you have something to share that is a personal, whether it's positive or negative, right? If you have a story that you want to share, we used to say you only have 3 sentences and then people are out. But now we're starting to see some really good engagement in, here's a paragraph, right? Here's the 2 paragraphs. And so I wouldn't let post length necessarily from a word count perspective, I wouldn't let that have a whole lot of impact on most platforms. From a video perspective, again, it's going to be very platform specific. On Instagram, you're going to want to, we have seen a lot of people have some good success posting short clips with a Instagram TV link to go watch the full video later. But you're going to want to make the first 15 seconds of that video really, really interesting if you expect them to take the next step and click and watch. Facebook videos, people will be on there and they can be 7 or 8 minutes and people are still completing all the way to the end. So.
Laura, what is your content approach? How do you choose which platform to put content on?
It's really a matter of recognizing the tone of each platform. In other words, Instagram is more of a casual tone. Twitter, you're going to find more of a little more of a, I want to say business oriented. That's not a good term. I don't know if Megan's got a better term for me, but just a little more geared towards the intellectual side of things, whereas Facebook is just a little bit all over there. So you can take a post about an event and just tweak it for each platform. So you're going to be short and sweet on Twitter. You can be a little more elaborate on Instagram if it's casual and just that friendly tone. On Facebook, you can maybe be more, here are the facts, here are the things and the reason why you should come. I want to just add to that, when you're looking at the type of posts you put out there and the length and everything, your ruler for all of this is to look at your insights. Always go back and look and see, because everyone's going to have a different audience. And if the long posts do well with your audience, then just go with it. But if you're not getting the engagement, then that's a good sign to pull back, do some shorter ones, or sprinkle through some long and short, and just see what your audience is engaging with. Because bottom line, we want engagement. We don't want to just put ourselves out there. We want to engage in a conversation on these social platforms. And here's the thing, if you get that engagement going and you get a social conversation happening, even if it's just a like or a comment that you respond to, the platforms are going to see that. They're going to recognize it, and they're going to bump your posts up. So if you're frustrated that maybe it doesn't seem like your posts are getting seen on Facebook, check the kind of posts you're putting out there. Get a post out there that's engaging, that you're getting some comments on, and then you make sure and follow up. Get on that post and reply to the comments, like a comment, give a nice several word response, and increase that engagement. And bottom line, that will help your post reach further and resonate more strongly as people see, little bit of the excitement and interaction that happens on your page.
Yeah, you're so right, Laura. It's social. It's a social interaction, and if we're not commenting on our postings and getting back to the people who are commenting on them, then we're losing our audiences. They want to have that engagement, that social interaction. So yeah, I so resonate with what you're saying. I had an additional question along with that line with the different platforms, because you are great at this, and that's memes and creating memes and the right size for the memes. Can you speak to creating the right kinds of memes for the platforms?
I'm glad you brought that up, because we have a couple comments over in the chat. Canva is excellent. So if you're wondering how people are making all these beautiful memes, they're not all in Photoshop making the memes. Canva is an excellent tool that you can get in there and make memes. You can go to Unsplash, get your royalty-free photos, bring it over into Canva, and then create from there. They've got templates in there if you're not very design oriented. And it's just an excellent tool for creating very engaging posts.
And to follow up, one more question, because I know you're really good at this too. Talk to us about our blog posts and the titles that we use for our blog posts and how important those are.
Okay, you're going to get me going on that one. We'll keep it very short. Here's the thing, everybody. If you're going to be out there on social media, and particularly when we're talking, I know, well, a blog can be very social if you're interacting, but your blog, or we haven't really talked much about YouTube, but even crossing over into YouTube, if you're going to step into those realms, you need to step into them with a strategy, and that would be with a good SEO, search engine optimization strategy, where you are doing keyword research and finding ways to optimize your title and even your descriptions with the keywords that apply to your topic. And so it will influence your title, it'll influence your description, it will influence your keywords that you put on that blog post or on your YouTube channel. And here's why this is critical. Years ago, when the online platforms opened up, years ago, you could come up with a real catchy title, that's just going to hook them, and it's cute and people will read it because it's cute. Well, nowadays, and especially for us as believers, the opportunity is huge for you to extend your reach by being very, very smart with keyword research and using that in titling your blogs, titling your YouTube videos, even your podcasts. So keep all of that in mind. And that's a big, again, the opportunity is huge if you will be very strategic in that. And it can also guide you on your topic choices. If you're, scheduling out your blogs or podcasts or YouTube, you can actually do keyword research and find out what are the questions that people are asking, what are they searching for online, and then create a podcast, write your blog, shoot your YouTube episode, and answer those questions. You're going to have a far greater reach than you would if you just, always just talk about your pet peeve or your pet topic, things like that.
We have talked a lot about Facebook and Instagram and a little bit about Twitter, kind of touched on Pinterest and TikTok. Any final thoughts about LinkedIn and Clubhouse? The Clubhouse is a little bit newer and it's an audio only platform, and LinkedIn is very geared toward business professionals. But do you have any thoughts in particular for using those platforms?
Clubhouse kind of came booming out of the gate here a couple months ago. It was the hot ticket to get a Clubhouse invite. It is audio only and it is not recordable. And so it kind of functions off this idea of fear of missing out, right? I want to be on there. I want to keep listening. It's like a never ending podcast about whatever topic you'd like to talk about. And it just keeps going, but you don't want to stop listening because what if you miss something great? What it has turned into very quickly is a lot of people standing on their soapboxes, shouting and trying to be the expert, who don't really have a lot of experience to back that up. Right? Because the people who are actually good at this are off doing it. Right. And instead, these folks are in the rooms talking about it. So it is interesting just from a kind of a meet new people perspective to go in. You can join these conversations, listen to speakers on all sorts of different topics. And so from that perspective, especially if you're a podcast person and enjoy that kind of learning and audio learning, it's definitely interesting. I don't know that it's going to have the staying power. They're already starting. I am in a group of social media marketers on Facebook. And at this point, no, like a month ago, everyone was clamoring for Clubhouse invites. And at this point, we all have 30 that nobody can even give away because nobody wants them. So already starting to see some dying out on that one. LinkedIn, especially from a professional perspective, is fantastic. I've seen especially folks who are speakers, authors, leadership coaches, those kind of people do really, really well with a great content strategy on LinkedIn. And sales folks too, if you're trying to build connections that way. So LinkedIn is kind of the sleeper. It's always flown under the radar and existed. But in certain capacities, it can be fantastic.
Well, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Megan. Thank you, Victoria, for this great chat room conversation, and Laura and Megan for being here with us tonight. Thank all of you also for joining us tonight, wherever you're coming from. We have a global audience, which is always wonderful, and I know many of you who are going to be watching this will watch at a later time as well. So know that we are always praying for you and that we care about you and what you're doing. I always like to end the evening with a challenge, something to leave you with, an assignment. I want you to go back and read Matthew 22:44-45. It's a story about Jesus confronting the Pharisees. You know, in our culture, in our world today, we need to speak the language of the culture, and social media is where we speak that language, where that can be heard. Jesus told stories and he asked questions. And when the Pharisees came at him each time, he never answered them without answering them with a question. And in this particular time, the Pharisees, of course, were the learned men of the law at the time, of the Jewish law, of the 10 Commandments of the Old Testament. They knew it backwards and forwards, and they were always trying to trip Jesus up. Paul was from Paul, the apostle, was from a legacy of a family of Pharisees. He was one himself. He held the coats while the Pharisees stoned Stephen, the first martyr in the Bible, until God got a hold of his life. So he had an intimate relationship with understanding who they are. But Jesus in this particular passage asked the question of them, what they thought about Christ and who is the Son of God, who is the Son. And that's what our culture is asking today on social media. What do we know about Christ and who is he? And we have the opportunity through social media, through our platforms, through what we do with our art, with our movies, with our television shows, with our podcasts, with our blogs, with our books, to tell those around us who Jesus is. So Jesus shut them all up by asking them a question. Go back and read that story tomorrow when you get a few minutes, or maybe tonight before you go to bed, and know who Jesus is and how will you communicate to those on social media and those on these platforms, that YouTube, on TikTok, all these platforms, these new platforms even, who Jesus is in their lives. My prayer is that you will think, that you will ponder, and that you will provide provocative questions, challenging questions, but bring clarity so that Jesus can be seen and that we can see who Jesus is through our postings and who we are. Thank you for supporting the Influence Lab. Don't forget to sign up for the journal if you have. So from the Influence Lab, we say good night.